Hello, babies. We're going to go ahead and just get into it today. We are on the chapter called Thunder, Roar and Lightning Crackle. The next morning, Eragon avoided bringing to mind any of the recent events. They were for him to consider. Instead, he focused his energies on figuring out how to find and kill the Razak. I'll do it with my bow, he decided, imagining how the cloaked figures would look with arrows sticking out of them. He had difficulty even standing up. His muscles cramped with the slightest movement, and one of his fingers was hot and swollen. When they were ready to leave, he mounted Kadok and said acidly, If this keeps up, you're going to batter me to pieces. I wouldn't push you so hard if I didn't think you were strong enough. For once, I wouldn't mind being thought less of, muttered Eragon. Kadok pranced nervously as Saphira approached. Saphira eyed the horse with something close to disgust and said, There's nowhere to hide on the plain, so I'm not going to bother trying to stay out of sight. I'll just fly above you from now on. She took off, and they began the steep descent. In many places, the trail all but disappeared, leaving them to find their own way down. At times, they had to dismount and lead the horses on foot, holding onto trees to keep from falling down the slope. The ground was scattered with loose rocks, which made the footing treacherous. The ordeal left them hot and irritable, despite the cold. They stopped to rest when they reached the bottom near midday. The Enora River veered to their left and flowed northward. A biting wind scoured the land, whipping them unmercifully. The soil was parched and dirt flew into their eyes. It unnerved Eragon how flat everything was. The plains were unbroken by hummocks or mounds. He had lived his entire life surrounded by mountains and hills. Without them, he felt exposed and vulnerable, like a mouse under an eagle's keen eye. The trail split in three once it reached the plains. The first branch turned north toward Cunin, one of the greatest northern cities. The second one led straight across the plains, and the last went south. They examined all three for traces of the Razak and eventually found their tracks, heading directly into the grasslands. It seems they've gone to Yazuak, said Brahm with a perplexed air. Where's that? Due east, and 4 days away, if all goes well. It's a small village situated by the Enora River. He gestured at the Enora, which streamed away from them to the north. Our only supply of water is here. We'll have to replenish our water skins before attempting to cross the plains. There is another pool or stream between here and Yazuak. The excitement of the hunt began to rise within Eragon. In a few days, maybe less than a week, he would use his arrows to avenge Garrow's death. And then he refused to think about what might happen afterward. They filled the water skins, watered the horses, and drank as much as they could from the river. Saphira joined them and took several gulps of water. Fortified, they turned eastward and started across the plains. Eragon decided that it would be the wind that drove him crazy first. Everything that made him miserable, his chapped lips, parched tongue, and burning eyes, stemmed from it. The ceaseless gusting followed them throughout the day. Evening only strengthened the wind instead of subduing it. Since there was no shelter, they were forced to camp in the open. Eragon found some scrub brush, a short, tough plant that thrived on harsh conditions, and pulled it up. He made a careful pile and tried to light it, but the woody stems only smoked and gave off a pungent smell. Frustrated, he tossed the tinderbox to Brahm. I can't make it burn, especially with this blasted wind. See if you can get it going. Otherwise, dinner will be cold. Brahm knelt by the brush and looked at it critically. He rearranged a couple of branches, then struck the tinderbox, sending a cascade of sparks onto the plants. There was smoke, but nothing else. Brahm scowled and tried again, but his luck was no better than Eragon's. Brisingar, he swore angrily, striking the flint again. Flames suddenly appeared, and he stepped back with a pleased expression. There we go. It must have been smoldering inside. They sparred with mock swords while the food cooked. Fatigue made it hard on both of them, so they kept the session short. After they had eaten, they lay next to Saphira and slept, great for her shelter. The same cold wind greeted them in the morning, sweeping over the dreadful flatness. Eragon's lips had cracked during the night. Every time he smiled or talked, beads of blood covered them. Licking them only made them worse. It was the same for Brahm. They let the horses drink sparingly from their supply of water before mounting them. The day was a monotonous trek of endless plodding. On the third day, Eragon woke well rested. That, coupled with the fact that the wind had stopped, put him in a cheery humor. His high spirits were dampened, however, when he saw the sky ahead of them was dark with thunderheads. Brahm looked at the clouds and grimaced. Normally I wouldn't go into a storm like that, but we're in for a battering no matter what we do, so we might as well get some distance covered. It was still calm when they reached the storm front. As they entered its shadow, Eragon looked up. The thunder cloud had an exotic structure, forming a natural cathedral with a massive arched roof. With some imagination, he could see pillars, windows, soaring tiers, and snarling gargoyles. It was a wild beauty. As Eragon lowered his gaze, a giant ripple raced toward them through the grass, flattening it. It took him a second to realize that the wave was a tremendous blast of wind. Brahm saw it too, and they hunched their shoulders, preparing for the storm. The gale was almost upon them when Eragon had a horrible thought and twisted in his saddle, yelling, both with his voice and mind, Saphira, land! Brahm's face grew pale. Overhead they saw her dive toward the ground. She's not going to make it. Saphira angled back the way they had come to gain time. As they watched, the Tempest's wrath struck them like a hammer blow. Eragon gasped for breath and clenched the saddle as a frenzied howling filled his ears. Caddock swayed and dug his hooves into the ground, mane snapping in the air. The wind tore at their clothes with invisible fingers while the air darkened with billowing clouds of dust. Eragon squinted, searching for Saphira. He saw her land heavily and then crouch, clenching the ground with her talons. Goddamn. The wind reached her just as she started to fold her wings. With an angry yank, it unfurled them and dragged her into the air. For a moment, she hung there, suspended by the storm's force. Then it slammed her down on her back. With a savage wrench, Eragon yanked Caddock around and galloped back up the trail, goading the horse with both heels and mind. "Saphira," he shouted, "try to stay on the ground. I'm coming." He felt a grim acknowledgement from her. As they neared Saphira, Caddock balked, so Eragon leapt down and ran toward her. His bow banged against his head. A strong gust pushed him off his balance, and he flew forward, landing on his chest. He skidded, then got back up with a snarl, ignoring the deep scrapes in his skin. Saphira was only 3 yards away, but he could get no closer because of her flailing wings. She struggled to fold them against the overpowering gale. He rushed at her right wing, intending to hold it down, but the wind caught her and she somersaulted over him. The spines on her back missed his head by inches. Saphira clawed at the ground, trying to stay down. Her wings began to lift again, but before they could flip her, Eragon threw himself at the left one. The wing crumbled in at the joints, and Saphira tucked it firmly against her body. Eragon vaulted over her back and tumbled to the other wing. Without warning, it was blown upward, sending him sliding to the ground. He broke his fall with a roll, then jumped up and grabbed the wing again. Saphira started to fold it, and he pushed with all of his strength. The wind battled with them for a second, but with one last surge, they overcame it. Eragon leaned against Saphira, panting. "Are you all right?" He could feel her trembling. She took a moment to answer. I think so." She sounded shaken. "Nothing's broken. I couldn't do anything. The wind wouldn't let me go. I was helpless." With a shudder, she fell silent. He looked at her, concerned. "Don't worry, you're safe now." He spotted Caddock a ways off, standing with his back to the wind. With his mind, Eragon instructed the horse to return to Brahm. He then got onto Saphira. She crept up the road, fighting the gale while he clung to her back and kept his head down. When they reached Brahm, he shouted over the storm, "Is she hurt?" Eragon shook his head and dismounted. Caddock trotted over to him, nickering. As he stroked the horse's long cheek, Brahm pointed at a dark curtain of rain sweeping toward them in rippling gray sheets. "What else?" cried Eragon, pulling his clothes tighter. He winced as the torrent reached them. The stinging rain was cold as ice. Before long, they were drenched and shivering. Lightning lanced through the sky, flickering in and out of existence. Mile-high blue bolts streaked across the horizon, followed by peals of thunder that shook the ground below. It was beautiful, but dangerously so. Here and there, grass fires were ignited by strikes, only to be extinguished by the rain. The wild elements were slow to abate, but as the day passed, they wandered elsewhere. Once again, the sky was revealed, and the setting sun glowed with brilliance. As beams of light tinted the clouds with blazing colors, everything gained a sharp contrast. Brightly lit on one side, deeply shadowed on the other. Objects had a unique sense of mass. Grass stalks seemed sturdy as marble pillars. Ordinary things took on an unearthly beauty. Eragon felt as if he were sitting inside a painting. The rejuvenated earth smelled fresh, clearing their minds and raising their spirits. Saphira stretched, craning her neck, and roared happily. The horses skittered away from her, but Eragon and Brahm smiled at her exuberance. Before the light faded, they stopped for the night in a shallow depression. Too exhausted to spar, they went straight to sleep. And that's the end of this one. Till next time.